Okay, good morning. Thank you all for attending this session. Thanks, Chris, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Brian Skripac. I'm the Director of Virtual Design and Construction at the Design Build Institute of America. So my background is architecture by practice. About 2 years ago, I transitioned to a professional organization that was focused on project delivery. So being able to come in and take my past experiences of how design and construction technologies can further drive collaboration in the delivery models that we talk about, design build and progressive design build, was really an exciting opportunity. So to talk about that, kind of want to share some of the experiences that I've had in the past and talk about why is it so difficult for us to collaborate and share information. I think one of the things that's interesting, Paul's presentation before, I was watching his slides and his talk, and it was a great lead into what I was talking about. And I was just talking to Diana, who'll be the next presenter, and we kind of said, we talked about, digital twins and AI and all of these other things that have encompassed what originally started as BIM. But the challenge that I always saw is we still don't do the basic things well, right? We have really bad models that we create. We don't follow standards. We don't have a lot of consistency. We don't have the opportunity to share and communicate all of this valuable data and geometry that we're creating. And a lot of that's based on our contractual silos. And we kind of get stuck in these little bubbles of working and not looking at the bigger picture. So that was kind of my interest. I saw a lot of design build projects when I was working at my previous firm. They always went more smoothly, whether or not we were the builder, whether or not we were just the architect or just the engineer or some combination of that, things worked better. And there was a lot of communication, there was a lot of trust, and there was a lot of collaboration that was ongoing. So that's kind of the background that I'll bring to this presentation and just give you some insight on where I'm coming from and what we talk about in defining best practice at the Design Build Institute of America as it relates to VDC. So just kind of to break it down, right? How many owners do we have in the room? If any, no owners. Okay, who's on the design side? All right, and then the construction side? Okay, a little bit of each, that's fine. We kind of talk about, maybe it's the project architect who's leading the team on the design team, and traditionally all of those design consultants are contracted underneath them and contracted under the builder or trade partners and subs and everybody else. And we kind of have a kickoff meeting, right? We color code this. This is my team. This is my tribe. This is who I'm working with. These are the people whose interests I need to look out for. And we notice that none of them are red, right? That nobody's looking out for the owner's interests sometimes. And we're all looking at our piece of the puzzle and what we're trying to do. So we go to a kickoff meeting. All the project executives are there, project managers, superintendent, construction managers. We're talking about the scope of work, our budget, our schedule, logistics, how we're doing all these things, but how often does BIM come up in those kickoff meetings? Those of you who've been to those meetings, it doesn't come up very often, does it? So it's, quite a few head nodding, right? That's an afterthought, right? That's somebody who's going to come in and write the BIM execution plan. That's the person, she's going to do clash detection later in the project. We don't need to worry about it. So how do we really engage that into a meaningful part of the project delivery? Because it does impact it. And we heard that in some of the sessions this morning. That's really a key aspect of what we need to do. And one of my goals is to really make that BIM VDC conversation much more of a horizontal part of the project, one that is inclusive and not just a little segment or silo of what we talk about at a certain time where we're accustomed to dealing with it. Inevitably, the design team, they have a BIM manager. The construction team's got a VDC leader, and they're going to sit down in a meeting for the first time, and this conversation occurs, right? I hope they don't ask for the model. They better give me the model, right? How many people have experienced that on projects, right? There's an immediate tension. There's some anxiety, and boy, that escalated quickly. And why is that? We're skeptical of one another. Many of those times we have separate contracts, right? We're contracted back to the owner as the design team, so is the builder. There's not a relationship that's inherently built between those two key parties of how they're going to share and communicate. So there's always going to be some skepticism. You're assuming the worst. Well, if I give the builder the model, they're going to change order the hell out of me, right? I didn't do this, and I know it's going to come back to bite me, right? You're in defensive mode. You're trying to protect your work, but we're not thinking about the scope of the project that we're dealing with. So we all talk about, BIM in the context of, yeah, everybody's doing it. Everybody does it in the room, right? We all do BIM, right? We all do it. And this was a conversation I had with one of my colleagues, and we were talking, and she's like, "Yeah, we all, everybody does it," and I was like, "Yeah, that's really the root. What is it? What are we talking about?" We're kind of ambiguous. We're kind of vague when we talk about this idea of BIM, and certainly Chris talked about it in a much broader context than most of us, look at location. What happens outside the building? What's the larger ecosystem of the community and the environment that we're building in? So I think one of the challenges that I saw in my past experience on the design side was, are we just doing something per our company standards, right? We have to produce a set of construction documents. I need to do BIM so that my construction documents, that flat paperweight, looks right at the end of the day so it can go out for bid. Sometimes we say, hey, we're really doing it well because I follow an industry standard. So, okay, that's good, that's better. But, is doing it really thinking about how it's going to benefit the team? What does the next project participant need to do their job better? And certainly, that's a challenge based on your contract delivery model, but we'll see as we go through the presentation, that's part of the evolution as well, right? If we just have to give the owner a set of contract documents as a design professional at the end of the day, that's our sole focus. We don't have an opportunity to learn from the trade partner, their expertise, the value that they bring to the team to say, hey, what if we did this differently and looked at it from this perspective? Oh, I never thought of it, let's move forward like that. So if we have an opportunity to think collaboratively about the project, it's certainly a different perspective that we can bring. And at the beginning of that project, we need to define what BIM actually is. There's an array of opportunities that we have. We talk contractually about, is it a deliverable? Is a model a legal document? Is it a pretty picture? Are we just using it for visualization, right? That's, that starts to come to the everybody does it perspective. We have some great literature in our proposal response to an owner. I think the biggest thing is it something reliable? If we look at it as something reliable, that's where we start crossing over and understanding what the designer's doing, what the builder's doing, and how we're bettering the project for the owner that we work on. And I think this idea of a right of reliance, creating a reliability on the information that we're providing for the team is where we can start to really enhance the efficiency in our project delivery. So I got 3 scenarios that I want to go through here that all kind of revolve around how models are used and share, and these are all real life experiences on project teams. This is probably the most painful one that I had. So owner RFP comes out, they have a very prescriptive requirement for BIM. They're actually using the model. It was great. It was a large healthcare facility. They said the architect must, follow the requirements in Exhibit Q. So somebody on the proposal team came from marketing. Hey, is this kind of what we normally do? Because we do it. So is this what we do? So get the RFP, RFQ, reviewed through it, and this was my email back. And I'm like, hey, there's a lot to consider here. They're like, well, what is all this stuff, right? There's legal needs to, I worked in a large AE firm, so legal had to review all the contract language going out. I'm like, somebody needs to review through and look at the ownership requirements of what's being set forth and how that model is going to be used somewhere down the road, right? It was design, bid, build. So this is a set of documents, it gets bid, and then somebody who you have no privity with is going to be using it. Model element reliance, again, we just talked about that. Oh, we have to buy 3 different softwares. Is that in the proposal budget? We have to validate existing conditions. Who's going to go do the laser scanning? Who's going to convert the model? Who's going to do this? That's another FTE for, how long? All of these things were time and money that are valid asks by an owner, but doing it's not necessarily included in it, right? That's not part of putting a set of contract documents together. We need to understand what that scope is and plan for it accordingly. So I have this great big long email that we saw. Hey, I'm like, I feel good, all right. I get a response back. Oh yeah, this is really good. We need to have a strong leadership position. Yeah, this is what we're trying to build, After the proposal goes out, I'm like, hey, what did we put in the language? Can I see the project team set up? They're like, oh yeah, if you go to page 10 or whatever, it said architect will carry out the design utilizing BIM, and it was like, oh man. I'm like, that's where we got to. We got from all this information and great conversation that we talked about, and we're just back to doing it. So that wasn't the best kind of outcome that I was personally looking for. And it started me to think more about, how are we doing this? How does project delivery come into that? And, doing it is, there's an ambiguity to saying you do BIM, right? I think we'd all agree that both images are BIM, but what's an owner looking for at the end of the day? It's probably some combination of things and a whole lot of other information that we didn't consider because they didn't know or they didn't know what to ask for. And we didn't have the opportunity to communicate with them what the opportunities could potentially be. So really the first solution to this scenario is get away from just talking about BIM in that vague term, right? Be specific about what you're going to do. Be intentional about thinking how you move through the design, construct, and operate phases of a project. And understand that you need a champion, right? The project manager, the superintendent, the construction manager, whoever it is, they need to be accountable for making sure this conversation's happening, but ultimately they're not the one who should be responsible. They're not the best suited individual to get into the detail and weeds of that conversation. So understanding accountability and responsibility and having the right people on the team at the right time is pretty important. In scenario 2, this kind of goes back to the confrontational designer and builder, right? They're going to ask for my model. Builder needs to do some coordination because they're going to have some prefabrication of building elements, and they ask the designer, hey, can we get your model? And they're like, the designer, no, my model, nothing goes up above 300. If you're doing coordination and fabrication, that's not my responsibility, that's means and methods. So how do you have a conversation about that? What is the tool or what is the process that you're looking for? So the colleagues that I worked on the design side as an architect, you hear prefab and trade coordination, you think the builder's asking for the image on the left, right? You're like, whoa, I don't have models, I don't have studs, I don't have headers, I don't have any of that stuff. Not what I'm doing, not my responsibility. But really all they're asking for is the image on the right. I'd like to get the model. Can I rely on your model that those walls are in the place that they need to be? Can you sign off on that? That's really low-hanging fruit, but there's still an apprehension of that, right? Based on what kind of project delivery model you're in, that's a challenge. So having that conversation and breaking it down makes it really easy. What are you looking for? What are you asking? And how is that model going to evolve, right? Not everybody on the design side should be expected to or is being asked to build what's on the left. And that's where you start thinking about model element authors and LOD and how do you define who's doing what. There's always going to be an evolution to things on a project. The design professional, the architect, they got to place the wall, they got to understand what the code requirement is, what's the construction of that wall, where's it going to be built, and how does that fit with the rest of the information. The metal stud person's going to be evolving that for certain things because it's going to be important for the contractor. There's going to be clash issues, headers, where do you have double studs along door frames, things like that. That's going to impact what some of the planning is. So you might want to do some of that. You don't need every stud, but there's going to be cases where you need to coordinate. So another example of this is light fixtures. Actually, Clive, who presented in the first one, and another presentation that he did last year, he said, why, he talked about LOD and their application planner, and he said, why have one light fixture when 4 or 5 will do? Right? And that's really the reality of it. The architect's got to place it because it's got to show up on their construction documents. Where does it fit in the room? I might have to dimension an incandescent recessed light fixture, or I might need to show where the 2x2 light fits in the ceiling grid. Well, the interior designer may be doing a rendering. They need one in theirs, and they have a very specific representation of what the reality of that is, which is different than the box or the circle that we as an architect put on. The electrical engineer's got to have something in their model so they can power to it, so it drives their schedules. Then the electrical contractor's actually going to put the realistic one in there as well as part of their purchasing and planning. So which one's right? Which one do I use? And that idea of redundancy really breeds errors. And you can kind of see this on a panel wall. Ultimately, the electrical contractors is what's installed down on the lower right, but you have 3 different versions of it over the course of a project that overlap, and who are you actually working with? Bring that party to the table earlier. Take that expertise, take that knowledge. If we can work around real information that's going to be constructed, our project teams can be that much more efficient in what they do. And we don't have to do it 3 times because that's just waste. Every one of those iterations is waste, and generally it's going to be an error because something's wrong. So that solution is really using LOD, understand what you're doing, and plan ahead to have a specific focused conversation on what your deliverables are and who's doing what. Take advantage of that next person in line so you can really get to an ideal solution at the end of the day on the project. In scenario 3, this is kind of also one of my favorites. How do we evolve as an industry and move past contract documents? So, builder, drawing set goes out, bids come in, low bid wins. Can I get the model? Sure, you can get the model. No, not sure you can get the model. Sorry. First answer is no, right? No, you can't have the model. It wasn't part of our deliverable. Inevitably, the contractor goes to the owner. Architect won't give me the model. Okay, I'll give you the model here. Just sign this. What is this? What do you get? Give me a disclaimer? It goes back and forth. The owner's like, hey, guys, figure it out, right? Just get the project built. You guys got to work together, figure this out, right? This is a typical confrontation that we always have. The language in that disclaimer, typically boils down to some of this isn't reliable, so don't rely on any of it. Contract documents are signed and sealed, you got to use those. But because you asked 20 times, I'll give you it with this disclaimer. That's not an efficient way of working. That's not being collaborative. That's not thinking about the project-centric approach. So basically use at your own risk. And then what happens? The model tends to be different than the drawings. And then you have the discrepancy. So it's just like model elements with multiple people, which one's right? So that tends to become an issue. And that focus on your individual product. I have a set of contract documents at the end of the day that I own a deliverable that the builder's going to build from and bid the project on. That's what causes the confusion that we have. When we talk about collaboration, this was really interesting. The AIA firm survey report from last year, they had a couple interesting statistics. It's the AIA, so of course, visualization and presentation renderings were the top 2 uses of BIM, which kind of pains me, somebody with an architectural background. But if you dig into it a little bit lower, it says 84% use the model to create coordinated construction documents. Great, that's a good number, like that. 80% share the model with their consultants. Remember, this is design, bid, build. So their consultants are their engineer, maybe interior designer, maybe a sustainability consultant, civil engineer, whoever it is. If you go a little bit further down, you saw a dramatic drop in numbers down to 54%. So only 54% of people were resolving conflicts with other disciplines. So 84% have coordinated construction documents through BIM, but only 54% are coordinating with other disciplines. So that was a little interesting. The other one was, 84% are sharing models with their consultants, but only 54% were sharing models with contractors and trade contractors. So we have a gap on the team, right? We're in these silos. Hey, I'm coordinating with my people, but not those people. And that's kind of an inefficient sort of process that we have. And I stole this from somebody else. I saw it online, right? This is a meme, the Homer Simpson thing, but this is the truth, right? Why don't we want to share our models? Because it's held together with duct tape and rubber bands, and the drawings look great, right? Those 2D details look fantastic. They should have come from the model. They didn't, doesn't mean that they're true to the model, but that's really a challenge, right? How do we get that reliability on the model so we're not stuck by these drawings and we don't have those redundancies, we don't have those errors? That's a big challenge for the industry. So what's our last solution, right? Shared risk. Not looking at this is my only deliverable is this, but looking at a larger perspective when sharing information and working within BIM. So it should be part of the process. It should be from the start. It should be inclusive of all the teams, and it should be a collaborative conversation that we have, not a disclaimer that when we're pressured to share something, we give it out and say, don't really rely upon it. So I think a big thing is utilizing our contract language. And even before contract language, think about the project delivery models. And this is really for the owner, right? The owner's the one setting forth these expectations. So if you can have a project delivery model where you can be descriptive of your goals, less prescriptive, and allow the design and construction teams to bring forth their expertise and their experiences and their ideas to say, this is how we can creatively solve your solution, there's much more of an opportunity for success at the end of the day. And that also gets you away from that, kind of 3-party agreement that we have on the left. You look at a design build delivery where it's the owner, instead of having 3 parties in 2 contracts, you have 2 parties in 1 contract, and everybody has a flow down to meet the same expectations on the project. So that really becomes a huge opportunity to drive success and value for the projects that we're working on, not just looking at our little piece of the puzzle. So if we kind of look back at that in kind of summation, we're saying, communication's the foundation for what we're doing. Define those goals, create a reliance. I think this is the biggest thing. I think as an industry, we're very focused on talking about creating BIM as a legal document. Let's build from the model. Let's make this the legal document. We don't need contract documents. We're going to need contract documents for a while, right? But let's make a reliability. What's the low-hanging fruit, like in the wall example? I used to have this frustrating conversation with a very talented architect who was very BIM savvy in our office, and he would say, as an architect, I should never do anything above LOD 200. I'm like, why is that? He's like, it's not my responsibility to do any of those things. I'm like, all right, and I always use the wall example, right? You're going to dimension that wall. Finished face of this wall is from finished face of that wall is 8 foot, right? It's a healthcare facility. That's code that you need 8 foot there. I'm like, why would you put a dimension on that? So I have to for the contract documents. But you can't tell somebody they can rely on the placement of that wall, which is purposefully 8 foot away from the other wall, that you put the dimension on. He said, well, that's different. So there's like this kind of interesting, kind of dynamic. There's a hesitation to break from the ways that we've done things in the past. So that kind of transition, not only in technology, like we heard earlier today, but in project delivery, collaboration, trust, building that reliance is key. Just take small aspects, take small wins and build upon that as you move from one project to another. And focus on collaboration, deliver that value for the owner, and move forward in a collaborative, efficient, and engaged way to deliver that success. So, I signed off on my disclaimer. That's kind of the call to action, to have this communication moving forward. So commit to doing it the right way. So I got a couple chuckles. That's a win for me. I appreciate that. So hopefully all of you kind of have some really good takeaways from not only this presentation and the planning track, but all the other sessions that you're in today to really take these ideas back to your office and share with your colleagues, and work in a more collaborative and engaged manner in the future. So thank you.